This morning is a bit, you got my slides. George is the man. I sent George these slides at 9:10 this morning, and he got them up. Oh my goodness, I thought there was no way. George, thank you so much. This morning, I'm kind of doing something a bit different. I'm more inviting you into my Bible study of Daniel chapter 3, really more than even preaching with you guys this morning. And the reason that is I went down a bunch of rabbit holes in Daniel chapter 3, and my mind has just been kind of exploding over some of the connections here in Daniel chapter 3. And so this morning, it would actually behoove you quite a lot to probably take notes, because the things I communicate, I'm going to do my best to kind of walk us down this path and to clearly articulate what it is that I believe Daniel chapter 3 is sharing. However, it really is going to be beneficial for you to go back and look at these notes yourself and kind of study out the text on your own. But this morning, we're going to be talking about the Pledge of Allegiance. And it just got really quiet. And so the title of my sermon is A Pledge of Allegiance. And the reason we're going to discuss it is I believe that's what's going on here in Daniel chapter 3. I want to preface everything that I share this morning that I am very grateful for the United States of America. I am incredibly grateful for those that sacrifice their lives and their families and their children to serve us, and especially here in the greater Hampton Roads area. And so thank you all so much. Those that serve in our military, or those that serve in political office. I've got an American flag. I fly it with great gratitude and even pride. I am very grateful for the United States of America. However, you will not ever hear me declare the Pledge of Allegiance to the American flag. You won't. And the reason is, I don't believe my allegiance should ever be to a flag. I believe my allegiance is only due to a king. And as we dive into the text this morning, my hope is not to make anybody anti-American this morning. And actually, if that's what you get from this text this morning, you're actually missing the text in incredible ways, and you're really twisting even what Daniel and his friends are doing in the entire book of Daniel. Nowhere are Daniel and his friends anti-Babylon. Okay, they are not anti-Babylon. They're simply pro-God. And my hope this morning is to convince you. You don't have to adopt my stance on the Pledge of Allegiance. I'm not asking you to necessarily do that. But what I am hoping to accomplish is to convince you to pledge your allegiance solely to Jesus. That if Jesus and your wife, Jesus and your children, Jesus and your country are ever in contradiction, which I promise they will be, that your allegiance is to King Jesus and his coming kingdom. Hopefully I haven't lost you yet. Amen? Go with me, Daniel chapter 3. Just briefly, actually, back in Daniel chapter 2, just some quick context. In verse 49, right after Daniel interprets the dream for King Nebuchadnezzar, right, all of God's people living in exile here in Babylon. If you don't know anything about the book of Daniel, please maybe go just watch the Bible Project video about Daniel. It'll give you great insight. But here, what Daniel does is he helps his three friends, Meshach, Shadrach, and Abednego, to kind of climb up the corporate ladder in verse 49. Moreover, at Daniel's request, the king appointed Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego administrators over the province of Babylon, while Daniel himself remained at the royal court. You see that? They are climbing up the corporate and political ladder of Babylon. These Israelite men are not anti-Babylon. Are you with me? But they are experiencing some great prosperity. They are experiencing fullness and richness and power and influence Actually, it's a byproduct of their faith, but they're not rejecting it, and they're okay with it. Daniel chapter 3, Tony did a fantastic job last week, kind of going through Daniel 3, 1 through 8, or 1 through 7. We're going to pick it up in verse 8, and we're focused on these three friends. We're focused on Meshach, Shadrach, and Abednego. There's this massive statue that's built by King Nebuchadnezzar. King Nebuchadnezzar issues a decree: you better worship it or else. You better worship this statue or else. What King Nebuchadnezzar is doing is he's dangling a carrot and he's threatening a stick. If anybody's in sales, you know what that means, right? The carrot is more money, right? More success. The stick is you better perform or you're getting fired. Any high schoolers play football? We're coming up on two-a-days. They do this in football all the time, right? You better bust your tail or I'm going to make you run more. And if you do bust your tail, there's a better chance you're going to start. Sometimes, unfortunately, we do this even in our marriages, right? Well, babe, man, if you let me go play golf today, I'll let you go have a massage. It's the dangling. Hopefully we're familiar with the metaphor, the dangling of a carrot, the threatening of a rod. Well, what King Nebuchadnezzar is doing, right, he's dangling prosperity and he's threatening a furnace. It's just like common manipulation. He's dangling in front of these Israelites, man, prosperity and power and influence and great prestige and royal food and meaning and name lust and all these different things. But if you don't, here comes the rod and here comes the furnace. Verse 8, hopefully you're with me. Daniel chapter 3, verse 8. At this time, some of the astrologers came forward and denounced the Jews. They said to King Nebuchadnezzar, "May the king live forever. Your majesty, you king, have issued a decree that everyone who hears the sound of the horn, the flute, the zither, the lyre, harp, pipe, and all kinds of music must fall down and worship this image of gold King Nebuchadnezzar has made. And whoever does not fall down and worship will be thrown into the blazing furnace." We see the rod. "But there are some Jews whom you have set over the affairs of the province of Asia, province of Babylon, Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego, who pay no attention to you, your majesty. They neither serve your gods nor worship the image of gold you have set up. Their allegiance is not to Babylon. Their allegiance is not to a flag. Their allegiance is somewhere else." Furious with rage, Nebuchadnezzar summoned Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego. So these men were brought before the king, and Nebuchadnezzar said to them, "Is it true, Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego, that you do not serve my gods and worship the image of gold I have set up? Now when you hear the sound of the horn, flute, zither, lyre, harp, pipe, and all kinds of music, if you do not fall down and worship the image I made, very good." If you do fall down and worship, very good. "But if you do not worship it, you'll be thrown immediately into the blazing furnace. Then what God will be able to rescue you from my hand?" Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego replied to the king, "King Nebuchadnezzar, we do not need to defend ourselves before you in this matter. If we are thrown into the blazing furnace, the God we serve is able to deliver us from it, and he will deliver us from your majesty's hand. But even if he does not, we want you to know, your majesty, that we will not serve your gods or worship the image of gold you have set up." It really is a remarkable scene of faith, of fidelity, of allegiance by these three men. They're in this place of prestige and honor, and they're rejecting the king's decree. I'm not going to bow down. I'm not going to worship. I'm not going to serve you or your golden statue. I can't. There's a different God that I worship. And so King Nebuchadnezzar, he doesn't just strike them down in the moment. He kind of gives them another chance, doesn't he? He invites them into the royal court. He says, "Hey, here's your last chance. I'll forget everything. I'll have mercy on you. Just bow down and worship this one time. Just do it once, just to appease me and the crowd." And they say, "We can't. Kind of do with us as you'd see fit." And it really is a remarkable scene of faith. But I want briefly this morning to recapture what faith is. And it is closely tied to this idea of allegiance. Faith is not just some intellectual agreement. Faith isn't either a blind trust. I loved what Jeff was sharing even about faith in the stage, in the cornerstone. He had faith that the stage was going to support him, hence why he walked up. Right? You have faith that your chair works. Otherwise, you would not sit down. Faith and works cannot be separated. But I think it goes even a step further. When we have faith in something, it demands our allegiance. Think about marriage for a moment. Think about the term faith. You guys, maybe I've shared this here, but you think about the term faithfulness. When I'm being faithful to my wife, if I'm being faithful to my wife, it's because I've made this covenant with her. And I'm entering into this agreement with her, and I've pledged my allegiance to her over every other woman or man. And it doesn't mean I'm anti-you. It doesn't mean I'm anti-Leslie. It doesn't mean I'm anti-Kamira. It doesn't mean I'm anti-Daniel or Howard or Ben. Or it doesn't mean I'm anti any of you guys. It's just when you come in conflict with my wife, guess who I choose? I choose my wife. Because I've entered into this covenant with her. These men, I'm harping on this for a reason, because the last thing I want this sermon to do is create some sort of revolt or make you think that I'm anti-American in any stretch of the imagination. I'm not. I'm incredibly grateful for our country. However, I will not bow down and worship our country. Why? Because my allegiance is to a different God. My allegiance is to a different kingdom. And that's what's going on here with Daniel's three friends. They're okay even bringing great prosperity to Babylon. They're helping Babylon become prosperous. Yet they still refuse to worship Babylon or their gods. Are you with me? And so these three men, they pledge their allegiance to Yahweh here in this great moment. And I look at this, and I really am so challenged by their faith. Because I think about the ways it would be so incredibly easy to compromise in this moment. Think about some of the excuses they could have made. Man, they could have had a side conversation. We will bow down, but we won't actually worship the idol. We won't become idol worshipers. We'll just do it this one time, and God will forgive us. The king has absolute power. We must obey him. God will understand. The king anointed us. We owe this to him. This is a foreign land, so God will excuse us for following the customs of this land. We aren't hurting anybody. And then if we get ourselves killed and some heathens take our position, they won't help God's people in exile. They're really fine-sounding arguments that these men could have made, but they refuse. They refuse and they say, hey, we're in God's hands. And we trust that the all-consuming fire, which is God, we trust that he can save us. But even if he doesn't, we still pledge our allegiance to him. Church, this is remarkable because what we see in this passage is not a fidelity enticed by external circumstances. It's a fidelity that's born from an intrinsic desire. It's a fidelity, and I don't want to say who. I had 2 Bible studies during the internship with young men. And they're talking about their desires for wanting to be Christians. And their desires were primarily rooted around 2 things. The desire to go to heaven and the fear of going to hell. That is the carrot and the rod. But church, that is not Christianity. If your desire this morning is to be close to God simply because you don't want to go to hell, that's not faith, that's selfishness. If you're like, yes, I want to worship Jesus because I simply want to live forever, man, it's still selfishness. It's still the wrong motivation. And what we're going to do this morning, and this is where we're going to go a bit sideways, what I'm about to do is like a big no-no when it comes to preaching, but we're going to do it anyways because I couldn't get around it. We're going to do a survey of the entire Bible. I promise you we won't be here forever. We're going to do a survey starting in Genesis, and we're going to end in Revelations. And hopefully what you're going to maybe become excited about, maybe even start to be convinced about, is that this story of the fiery furnace is a microcosm of the entire biblical story, and also a microcosm of your life. And this empire, Babylon, that it is a metaphor, it is an image for so much more than just a kingdom that reigned 2,000 plus years ago. It's actually a kingdom that is still very much alive today. So turn with me back to Genesis chapter 11. I've got it on the screen. Man, George, thank you so much for the slides. Saved my behind. Genesis chapter 11. We're actually going to see Babylon introduced here. This is a post-flood, right? Post-Noah. And so it says, now the whole world had one language and a common speech. As people moved eastward, they found a plain in Shinar and settled there. They said to each other, come, let's make bricks and bake them thoroughly. Guess where they made them? Fiery furnace. They used bricks instead of stone and tar for mortar. Then they said, come, let us build ourselves a city with a tower that reaches to the heavens, so that we may make a name for ourselves. Otherwise, we will be scattered over the face of the earth. But the Lord came down to see the city and the town where the people were building. The Lord said, if as one people speaking the same language they have begun to do this, then nothing they plan to do will be impossible for them. Come, let us go down and confuse their language so they will not understand each other. So the Lord scattered them over all the earth, and they stopped building the city. That is why it was called Babel, or Babylon. Because there the Lord confused the language of the whole world, and from there the Lord scattered them over the face of the whole earth. We're introduced to Babylon here in Genesis chapter 11. And it's a kingdom that's built for whose honor? Man's honor. It's a kingdom that's born out of the wrong motivation. It's a kingdom born out of the carrot dangling in front of them for their name lust, for their promotion, for their prosperity, for their rule. Church, I don't know about you, but this is like the greatest God I battle in my own life. And for me, it gets so ugly so quick. My entire life, I've had a very high value of success. And it's fueled everything in my life. Everything. It was the only reason I really did well academically. I never cared about academics. And it's proof because I just cheated my way through high school and college. I wasn't a Christian, so don't judge me too much. But the only reason I wanted to do well academically is I wanted to do better than you. Honestly, like when we got a grade back, I really didn't care what my score is. I just wanted to know, did I beat you? Seriously. And I didn't even want to be an engineer. I studied engineering in college. I just studied engineering because I thought that was a really cool sounding degree and that people would respect me, which therefore made me better than you. I made a bet in my freshman year of college with somebody. This is really gross. Caveat. I made a bet with some friends my freshman year of college of who could have the most immoral relationships with women. And I simply took advantage of people simply to win a bet so that I could be better than you. There's the only reason I was decent at athletics. It fueled everything, everything of who I was before I was a Christian. I wanted my name on billboards. I used to go in the front yard and imagine I was a Cleveland Indians player. And I was in the World Series. I was in the front yard with the bases loaded and a 3-2 count. And I hit a grand slam. And as I jogged the bases, everybody chanted, Jimmy, Jim. Like it's so deeply ingrained in me. And how it comes out as a minister is so ugly. I can view people as numbers that make me feel better about my job as a minister. I can be more focused on the attaboys or the man that was great or that was great insight after a sermon than pleasing Jesus. I can get so focused on worshiping the God of ministry that I neglect my marriage. This is like deeply ingrained in who I am. And as you can see, I'm kind of coming to this Bible study and studying out Babylon. I'm like, oh my gosh, I pledge my allegiance to Babylon so quickly, time and time and time again. But the God of Babylon, it's more than just the God of success. It's more than just the name lust and the popularity and the reputation. Go to Revelation chapter 18 for me. There's actually, we're going to finish up in 1 Peter as well this morning. It's totally the Holy Spirit that Jeff shared 1 Peter chapter 2. We're going to close in 1 Peter chapter 2 this morning. But Revelation chapter 18, we're going to see Babylon come on the scene again. And by the way, Babylon's essentially non-existent by the New Testament. It's like a small little community that has zero influence, and there really isn't even a lot of history that tells us that Paul or Peter or any of the apostles made their way to Babylon during their lifetime. There's zero significance of the physical place of Babylon come New Testament. And yet the author in the book of Revelations references Babylon actually quite a bit. Chapter 18, verse 3. After these things, I saw another angel coming down from heaven, having great authority, and the earth was illuminated from his glory. And he cried out with a mighty voice, saying, Fallen, fallen is Babylon the Great. She has become a dwelling place of demons, a prison of every unclean spirit, a prison of every unclean and hateful bird. Here's the key. For all the nations have fallen down because of the wine of the passion of her sexual immorality, and the kings of the earth have committed acts of sexual immorality with her. They've given their allegiance. They've pledged their fidelity with her. And the merchants of the earth have become rich from the excess of wealth of her luxury. Church, what Babylon seems to be, and man, Tim and Mary, I'd love for them to come up and correct me in a couple weeks, but Babylon really does seem to be this image of the kingdom of God. That Babylon is the kingdom of chaos, versus Jesus' kingdom is the kingdom of order. And here in Revelation chapter 18, we see that Jesus is announcing his triumph eventually over this disgusting and vile and ruthless kingdom that is Babylon. But we also have to see that in Revelations, the author does claim that every nation is under her rule. And it's seen by their infidelity with her. I shared about myself, right, and the gods that I'm tempted to worship. What about you, church? What is the God? Who is the God that you run to when you're feeling overwhelmed? when nobody's looking and you're sitting at home, where's the God that you find comfort in? Is it the God of sex? Is it? Is it pornography and masturbation? Is it the God of comfort? But I'm always trying to do the next thing that makes my life feel easy, that distracts me, right? Just so I can be a little bit more comfortable. Maybe it's the God of gossip and slander. It's actually a big God today. The assassination video of Donald Trump. There's only so much content that you can watch that's specifically about the assassination attempt. But church, there's a lot of gossip and slander that you can consume that's about that assassination attempt. The Olympics, right? Certainly there seems to be a bit of controversy that was surrounded by the Olympics, but there's only so much of one video that you can consume about the actual events that happen before you go down this visceral hole that's all about slander and gossip, and all of a sudden you become anti-France. Like, you laugh. I've seen it all over Facebook. Why? I've consumed way too much of it. It's every sports talk radio. Gossip and slander. And you know what it does? It destroys us. Church, it does. And I like kind of went into this election. I was like, man, this might not be that bad, right? And there was just loads of gasoline that was just dumped on this political election. Loads, right? And now I'm like sitting here afraid. I'm like, oh my gosh, is this like 2016? Is this 2020 all over again? I've only been a Christian since 2014. I only know 2 presidential elections. But we laugh. But you want to know what's sad? I've yet to see the church be the church through an election. I've only been here 6 months. I don't know about you. But I've seen an election divide people. I've seen people become pro-Republican, pro-Democrat, and anti-Jesus. They begin pledging their allegiance to left or right, and they forget about their king and his kingdom. Church, Babylon is knocking on your door and desires to consume you and bring utter chaos into your family, into your marriage, into your children, and into this church. And all she's doing is dangling a carrot and threatening a furnace. And my plea this morning is your desire to be faithful to the King comes from an intrinsic place rather than extrinsic. Yeah. What do I mean? First Peter is a pretty incredible book. We're going to end here. And George, I really appreciate everything you did, but we're not going to go to 1 Peter chapter 1 at the end. We're called it a bit of an audible. But First Peter, Peter actually gives reference to Babylon as well. And I think this makes it very applicable for us this morning. First Peter chapter 1, Peter, this is what he writes. He says, Peter, an apostle of Christ Jesus, to God's elect, to the church, right? The church exiles throughout America, exiles throughout Pontus, Galatia, Cappadocia, Asia, Bithynia, exiles throughout Spain, Jeff and your son, and wherever you are. To the exiles, to the church scattered all over. Right? That's what this book's all about. It's Christians living in exile. who are the Christians living in exile, or what are they living in exile to? Go to 1 Peter chapter 5. This is like, my heart leaps at this kind of stuff. 1 Peter chapter 5, it's the end, and this is Peter's conclusion. And Peter, he does something a bit strange. He says, this is NIV, she who is in Babylon, chosen together with you, sends you her greetings, so does my son Mark. If you go back, look at the verse right before this, and here in this verse, Peter's referencing specific names right before this. But here in the middle, he leaves it ambiguous. He says, she, the chosen one where? The chosen one in Babylon. Where else is the feminine idea, the feminine pronoun used for God's people? The bride of Christ. So look at the liberty that the NET Bible takes. 1 Peter 5, verse 13, the church in Babylon, chosen together with you, greets you, and so does Mark, my son. Do you catch that? Peter's saying the church, God's people, the elect, they're living in exile in Babylon. That's us today, living in exile of Babylon. And my plea, my hope from this text is that our allegiance is not to the Babylonian Empire. It certainly is not to the gods of Babylon. But our allegiance is to the King of Kings, the Lord of Lords, and the God of gods. We'll close with 1 Peter chapter 2. Jeff, he took us all the way up to this verse. Jeff, really, he put it on the tee for me. And hopefully, I'm taking us home. And you guys can say, Jimmy. Just kidding. Yeah, Jesus, thank you. Definitely don't do that after I shared my sin with you. Look at, this is so special, church. We're talking about intrinsic. We don't want to be motivated by the carrot or the rod. It's not about promised prosperity. It's not about the fiery furnace. Look at this. 1 Peter chapter 2, verse 9. This is speaking about the elects. This is speaking about those in exile. This is speaking of the church. You, church, you are a chosen people, a royal priesthood. You together. Not the United States of America. The church, you are a holy nation. God's special possession, that you may declare the praises of him who called you out of darkness into his wonderful light. Once you were not a people, but now you are the people of God. Once you had not received mercy, but now you have received mercy. Dear friends, I urge you as foreigners and exiles to abstain from sinful desires which are waging war against your soul. Live such good lives among the pagans that though they accuse you of doing many wrongs, they may see your good deeds and glorify God on the day he visits. Man, we live from this place of grace. Paul says that the thing that motivates him, it's not the promise of heaven, it's not the threat of hell. It's the love of Christ. The love of Christ is the thing that compels him. The love of Christ is the thing that controls him. It's my relationship with my wife, not the things that she offers, that continues my fidelity with her. Jesus looks at you and he says, you, church, you are a holy nation. You are the living stone. Live as foreigners. Be holy. Be set apart. Don't be anti-America. But please, I plead with you, be pro-Jesus. May we pledge our allegiance to the King of Kings, the God of God, and the coming kingdom that is certainly coming. Thank you so much, church.